Giant have got an all-new trail bike. It's light, it's rangy, and as we found out, in the right hands is an absolute rocket ship. We're going to be looking at the detail and its insane capabilities. Yes, Giant have dragged us down here to the beautiful south of France and forced us to swing a leg over the all-new Trance E. But it's not just one bike, it's 5 in both carbon and aluminium. And as we'll find out, one of, if not the most customizable E-mounted bikes on the planet. The highlights then, well, we've got 140mm rear, 150 front, 29-inch wheels, the all-new Sync Drive Pro motor by Yamaha, and a bike that can metamorphose between a low slack charger and a steeper higher cross-country style stylist. But that really is just scratching the surface. The motor is customizable. We've got an app, an incredibly clean cockpit area, and as we'll see on the higher models, a bike which has many personalities in terms of its suspension character. The Trance now comes in carbon and also aluminium. The integrated system of ride control display, remote, Sync Drive Pro motor, and also the Energy Pack 625 and 750 watt-hour batteries with the option of having a 250 watt-hour battery bolt-on makes the Trance one of the longest range eMTBs out there. The Maestro Suspension has 4 pivot points, 2 links, all working together to make a single floating pivot, which I have to say is very lively indeed. On the top of the seat stays, you have a flip chip, which means you can raise or lower the bottom bracket. But for me, I think one of the cool features is the Smart Assist. Now, this is an automatic mode, and I have to say I used it an immense amount when I raced the EWS in Finale on its stablemate, the Reign. Basically, the motor has 6 sensors which detect just how much pressure you're putting through the pedal. So the motor gives you just the right amount of assistance you need. So in turn, that governs your body and your battery so you don't use too much power. Very cool. And don't forget the all-new Giant Ride Control app, which allows you to personalize your bike and the controls. And also, don't forget those big 2.6 tubeless tires, which I'm loving. Wow, this is an insanely hard section. The bike is charging. I'm in automatic mode. Wow! Well, whilst we're here in the angular cliffs just inland from the Mediterranean, maybe an appropriate time to talk about the geometry of this all-new Trance. Well, we're looking at a 65.8 head tube angle, a 76.5 seat tube angle, a chainstay of 473, and a reach. Now, I'm 6 foot, I'm riding a size large, and the reach here is 482. But I think another important number on the bike is actually the standover, because the standover on this bike is crazy low. It really allows you to move around the bike when you're climbing and descending. I just want to focus our attention for just a minute on some of the fine detail of this bike. Starting off with the frame, it really is a work of art. The way that this rear swing arm is sculpted here, like there's no sharp edges, and equally up in this area here. And then when we focus in a little bit closer, things such as the port for the battery charging lead, it is a proper job, and maybe an example for other brands. There's no flimsy pieces of plastic there that can just break off. There's places like this where a slightly longer chainstay, slightly steeper head angle makes this bike absolutely dynamite to climb in. Maybe take a moment to ponder then amongst the alpine pine and juniper just what this Trance is all about. Now recently I got into a bit of a brawl in some pretty hefty terrain about 100 kilometers east of here at the World Enduro Series on the bigger brother or sister of the Trance, the Reign E+. At 160mm travel rear and 170mm front, the Reign E is very much a big, bad enduro bike built for getting involved in trouble, whereas the Trance, I would suggest, is one for avoiding trouble. Nevertheless, as I mentioned earlier, in the right hands, it's not exactly the feeble relation. No, this bike is very much from the same mold. Blood brothers, if you like. What I will say, however, is having ridden both bikes and kind of meant it, both up and down, I think they are very different beasts. For going down, that Reign is a monster, whereas when it comes to technical climbing, this bike is quite different to the Reign. It really is a monster in its own right. Time now, though, I think, to dive back into some fine detail around the motor and the controls and the display on this bike. First up is the Ride Control Ergo 3 remote on the handlebar here. You can either have it left, you can have it right, or by way of the app, you can actually have it both sides of the bike. And I think this cockpit layout is probably, actually maybe definitely, the most low profile minimalist one you will have on any eMTB. And the remote control is one which you can instinctively feel for, rather like a shifter, rather than the look and push on some E-mounted bike controls. Secondly is the display. This is Ride Control Go. This is your multi-function control center of the bike, and here you can look at the battery levels and also control the mode on your bike. Now, turning to the motor, the Sync Drive Pro by Yamaha is now smaller, lighter, and offers more ground clearance than the previous model. And also, many of you guys will be pleased to hear, it's actually significantly quieter, although I thought the previous motor was pretty quiet anyway. Now, there's all new electronics on this bike. The batteries, the sensors, and the remotes are all from Giant. Plus, remember, the software, that is pretty much the mindset, an evolved mindset, which the guys at Giant have worked on for many, many years. Do you know what? Even though this is very much a video all about the Trance, I cannot help but bring the Giant Reign into it as a point of reference, since I got so very involved in it in the past few months. And I've always thought with this, and I've agonized over it a million times, is which bike would I choose? Would I choose the Reign or would I choose the Trance? Because just because the Reign has got more travel doesn't mean to say it's better. It's simply different. Nevertheless, which one would I choose? It has been a question which has been on my brain since I've been heavily involved in this bike as well. And I think in as much as the Reign is fantastic at going down and getting to the downs, and this bike is fantastic at getting up the ups and getting to the ups, I think as an all-round bike, this probably has a bit more versatility. And that comes down to a feeling and also where I live. Because if I lived near a bike park and I did a lot of enduro races, very much the Reign. But for me, in the terrain that I live in, that is the ticket, for sure. As I mentioned, there are two ways to control the functionality of the Trance E. You've got the top tube display and also the remote on the handlebar. And the great thing about this is it removes the need for any wiring and also any handlebar mounted displays there to clutter the cockpit. So, super clean. Switch on the Trance and the motor instantly engages the automatic support mode. And do you know what? I think that this is such a cool feature. And as much as you can fine tune the settings of the motor, I feel, a bit like suspension dials, you'll never get the ultimate setting for every track. And because you are covering so much ground on eMTBs, I think ultimately that automatic mode is more important to more people. Of course, you still have the manual modes of Power, Sport, Active, Basic and Eco to work through. But you know what? I really do use the automatic a lot, even in an environment such as this. And I really like the way that more and more brands now are going for the minimalist display, because some of us actually don't have time to look at the display while we're riding. Having said that, I think it is good that Giant have the option of having a bar mounted display if you need to see your data. And remember, on that app, there is a ton of data for you to tune into. I think what we're saying here is that ultimately, via the motor, the controller, and the app, you can either switch the bike on and forget it, or get heavily involved and deep dive into the fine detail of the motor characteristics. And the same now goes for the suspension on the Trance. Now, the Trance comes in 3 models in carbon and 3 models in aluminium, and the top carbon model actually comes with the radically revamped Fox Live valve. Now, Fox Live valve is, in simple terms, an automatic suspension setup, a little bit like the motor controls on the bike. Now, the Live valve comes with 5 custom presets and presets within the presets. So, like the motor, you can actually deep dive into fine-tuning the suspension of your bike, or simply set it up and go. I think hats off to Giant for building some incredible versatility into this bike, and it's probably one of the most customizable e-mountain bikes on the market. But I haven't actually spoken about the battery yet, have I? Now, on the carbon bikes come with, surprisingly, a 625 watt-hour battery, but with the option of bolting on a 250 watt-hour power pack. And this time we have the 3 Trance Advanced bikes: Starry Night, Panther Green and Navy Blue. Now, these bikes come in carbon fibre, but the key differences between the 2, the 1 and the 0 are primarily that these bikes have aluminium wheels, cranks, handlebar and stem, whereas the high-end bike, the top-end Advanced 0, has carbon wheels, cranks, bars, plus of course the 0 and the 1 have the Fox Live valve on them. And that's it from us here in France. Hopefully we've given you some insight into the detail and also the capabilities of this all-new Trance. So, a bike which has 1 motor and 6 models to choose from for what is ultimately a trail rocket ship.